I would like to call upon the faculty for the last session. It's my great honor actually to have three rheumatologists with us for this meeting. We have Dr. Lisa Rajshekhar. Dr. Lisa Rajshekhar, as many of you know, she heads the rheumatology department. She's professor, actually, Professor Rajshekhar, and at Nizam Institute of Medical Sciences. She did her earlier training with another very early rheumatology, Professor Bamrin, who many of us know in the uveitis circles. And she has been instrumental in helping us understand various diseases and the rheumatology associations with them, as well as help us so much in taking care of our patients. The second panelist we have is Dr. Ramesh Joyce. You have heard me already introduce him. Dr. Joyce is an outstanding rheumatologist from Bangalore, and he also collaborates with Padmamali, and I'm sure with many other ophthalmologists in cases that we have seen earlier. And welcome again to our meeting. Thank you for participating in it. And the third panelist we have is Dr. Raj Kiran, who is we call him a friendly neighborhood rheumatologist because physically also he and Dr. Lisa both are located quite close by. And we really push Raj Kiran into looking at our patients and literally sort of doing a lot of things for us for those patients. And he goes out of his way. So thank you very much. So my co-discussant for this session is Dr. Soumya Basu. I hope he is still logged in. Soumya, and your mic they've unmuted you hopefully now, and you're able to.
Yeah, I'm around. Thank you.
Great. So if we can have, if anybody would like to share the video amongst the panelists so that we can see you as well, that will be nice. It's not a must, but if you can do that, it'll be very nice. So we can see who we are talking to. Yeah. So Rajkiran, as you asked me that what is it that you people are going to ask us? Believe me that for at least even before, in my case, we have learned a lot because we have been able to share of our cases with you. But when you start off, you've just read fresh from the textbook, not you, but us ophthalmologists. And then we're looking into cases with uveitis, with scleritis. And then we think about the textbook kind of associations. So my open question for all the three rheumatologists are, so a patient comes in, and you've seen that in some of the cases also, the patient underwent a rheumatological workup. So we said the patient has scleritis, sent to the rheumatologist, and a workup was done. It was another thing that it turned out to be an infection. So the rheumatologist would not know that. We just said it's scleritis. So when we have a patient who comes in with scleritis, and maybe we can just go, we can start off with Dr. Lisa. So what are the things that you want us to inform you about? And of course, you are much more astute because you have seen a lot of ophthalmological manifestations as well. But in a general way, what are the things you want us to inform you about? And what is it that you look at in the patient? When we say a patient has scleritis, kindly evaluate. So you can unmute your mic, Dr. Lisa.
You have two questions here. First is what you would like us to know from you.
Correct.
So basically, when you send a patient to us, then by default, we assume that you have ruled out infectious scleritis. And I've heard the difficulties in diagnosis and the misses that happen at your end. But when you send it to us, then obviously we look for certain common clinical conditions like basically primary systemic vasculitis, and GPA is the most common. But we could also look for EGPA, and definitely in RA, there is nothing to look for.
Sorry to interrupt. For the benefit of the audience, if you can just expand on those, because not everybody may know what is EGPA, for example, or GPA.
So GPA is granulomatous polyangiitis, which we have discussed through the seminar today. And EGPA is a sister of GPA. It's a eosinophilic granulomatous polyangiitis. So these two are primary systemic vasculitis, which can be associated with ocular manifestations, GPA being much more common. When patients with scleritis come to us due to rheumatoid arthritis, then there's not much to look for because they usually have a very evident rheumatoid arthritis already set in and there for many years. So if you are sending to us a patient who has got no other clinical manifestations, then we usually want to look at ANCA. because that is the one which is most often associated with a systemic cause of scleritis and can often be a first manifestation, as has been emphasized quite often in the seminar today. So when it is the first manifestation and we are relying only on ANCA for a diagnosis, then we must remember that with limited vasculitic disorders, especially limited to the eye or only to the upper respiratory tract, ANCA can be negative in as high as up to 30% of patients. So it is very important that we look in such patients who have limited scleritis, who are ANCA negative, not to discard the diagnosis of a primary vasculitis, which is not yet systemic, but would need immunosuppressive therapy when both teams discuss that there is no other possibility for the scleritis. So that's one point I would like to make.
So, Dr. Ramesh, when let's say Padmavani sends you a patient and the patient may not have, or we may not really evaluate for the systemic component, we expect that you would do that. So, what are the ABCs that you look for in that patient?
So, as Dr. Lisa said, infection is first, you would have excluded. That's what we all assume when patients come to us. But then there are subtle questions that we need to ask patients, because a lot of the symptoms that happen systemically may not come along with the eye disease. They may have had subtle symptoms for a long time, and then you might be seeing only the red eye because scleritis is something that's glaring and everybody notices. So some of the symptoms are symptoms of chronic sinusitis. So a lot of people think it's allergy that they have. So recurrent nasal obstruction, nasal crusting, recurrent serous otitis media, glue ear. So they may be visiting various specialties, and they could be going to the ENT doctor who may be repeatedly treating the patient just for sinusitis. I may not have asked the history about the eye or other things. Then there are people who could have, if you come out from the ENT, could have other manifestations like arthritis. They could be having skin rashes. I would also ask them for symptoms of peripheral neuropathy, because mononeuritis multiplex is a very common finding in vasculitis. So I would ask them for numbness, tingling sensation in their hands and feet, and obviously do a quick neurological examination to look for it. Obviously, if you look at vasculitis in general, it can affect any system from head to the foot. You could have cranial, you could have peripheral, you could have ocular, you could have GI, you could have pulmonary. So we quickly go through some questions pertaining to all these systems and do a quick examination just to make sure we don't miss out on things. But also important is there are certain clues on the basic test. I mean, most of the times you would have done the basic test by the time they reach us. So on a blood count, I would look for any thrombocytosis. If I see thrombocytosis, that tells me that you're looking at an inflammatory problem. Then a high inflammatory marker and chronic anemia. So these are some of the things, on a subtle thing. But as I reiterated earlier, a simple urine examination to look for protein, a simple examination to look for RBCs. Because one of the important things we have to remember is urine is a simple test, and a lot of laboratories do not take care while doing a urine specimen. So you might get diverse reports on a urine examination from different labs. So you have to be very careful on a simple, because we rely a lot on good urine reports. So that's a very important thing. And then after that comes, any particular investigation that is attributed to any particular system that we look at. Say, for example, if there are pulmonary symptoms, I start investigating the lung. If there are neuropathic symptoms, I investigate the nerve, so on and so forth. Obviously, the immunological screening many a times is already done by the time I see the patient. But still, if it is not done, I do the ANCA test. It's one of the important things, as Dr. Lisa was saying. But as Dr. Lisa reiterated, it doesn't have to be positive in everyone.
So before I hand over to Soumya to ask his set of questions, I'm going to ask Rajkiran a specific question. Because Dr. Joyce has, the way he practices and probably the ophthalmologist he collaborates with may be slightly different from the set of ophthalmologists that send cases to you, Dr. Rajkiran. And in this way, we can answer even Arjun's question. So for a patient who has a first episode of scleritis, is it necessary to do the complete systemic evaluation and panel of tests?
No, I don't think so. If any patient has only single episode of scleritis, if he doesn't have any other symptoms pertaining to any other autoimmune disease, maybe I particularly don't think so. He requires any extensive evaluation because most of these investigations are very costly. If you do
Yeah.
all tests, again, we also need to look at the patient profile. Because if any patient comes to me who is apprehensive, very educated, and he wants to know exactly what is the reason, I would conduct all these tests. But any patient like coming from a rural background or doesn't have much of finances, you would sit and counsel with him. Single first episode only for few days, I don't think so. As you said, most of us know, like we start with NSAIDs and topical steroids. If it doesn't respond, we go to oral steroids at a tapering phase. I think we can wait for a month. And like if the patient doesn't have any other associated systemic symptoms, like as Dr. Ramesh said, but if it has any systemic symptoms, like history of sinusitis or history of hearing loss or coughing and chest X-ray shows doesn't some problems, or urine shows any proteinuria or an ear inflammation recurrent, some pointer if it's there, I think we need to evaluate. We should not leave that patient. If nothing is there, my personal opinion, depending upon the patient's preference, we need to sit and talk with him, and we need to have a shared decision between patient, rheumatologist and ophthalmologist, and move forward. Because again, it consumes lots of money if we start doing, because ANCA and rheumatoid factor anti-CCP and routine investigations, they are a bit costly. But that's my personal opinion.
So in other words, in a scenario of a patient with constrained resources, and say it's the first episode, mild, so what Arjun or the rest of us could do is take a very good history and ask for certain questions which involve the systemic component as well, and take a management decision on whether we really need to send the patient across. But probably in the patient comes out with recurrence, then in those instances, we are more likely to send the patient. We will try and make our very best to send the patient across to rheumatologist. So
Dr.
I'm going to,
Samusina,
yes, Dr. Lisa.
I would agree with you here that the caveats are that this is a mild disease and that you're able to keep the patient on follow-up.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
if you lose out on a patient with primary systemic vasculitis, which is limited, then we've seen and case presentations also that it's very difficult for patients to follow up, difficult to
Yes.
get them to a rheumatologist. That's why if I don't know, if I have to do one test, I would probably do an ANCA. If it is
Right.
negative, I would still be a little relieved. But
Yeah.
yes, if it is mild and
Yeah.
subsiding with NSAID, it's fine.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Soumya for his set of questions, and then we'll come back to the audience questions and to Partho also.
Yeah. So thank you very much. This is turning out very interesting. So I will put the points raised by the three rheumatologists here from the ophthalmologist perspective. So say tomorrow a scleritis patient, diffuse anterior scleritis comes to me, and I do a thorough clinical evaluation. I rule out any kind of pus pointing or any other signs that might be suggestive of infectious scleritis. Because like you said, the job of ruling out the infection is on the ophthalmologist. So that has to be clear. I assume that we would probably also test for at least TB and syphilis, both of which are known to cause scleritis, both anterior and posterior scleritis. Having done this part, we would also inquire about the subtle signs that Dr. Joyce mentioned about, and others too, from the earlobes to the skin to the joints, the peripheral neuropathy, and all of these signs, and try to elicit any of these if we can on our own from the patients. Then what are the other investigations we advise the patient before we refer the patient to you? Now, based on the points raised by you, let me try to list them out, and please let me know if I'm missing out on something or maybe something that need not be done. So I would definitely do a complete blood count. It will tell me, like you mentioned, about anemia is one thing. Then the differential WBC count, it might give us some idea about what might be going on. The total counts as well. Then the thrombocytosis that you just mentioned. So the blood count will help in that way. Urine examination, everyone has stressed all throughout the urine protein, the urine RBCs. That might tell us about underlying systemic primary vasculitis, because as was mentioned earlier, the kidney might be damaged significantly before the creatinine shows any signs. So even before the creatinine, it's the urine test, and at a good lab, that will tell us what's going on. So complete blood counts, the urine evaluation, what next? Now, I assume that I have a patient who doesn't have any other systemic signs that I could pick up. Definitely no signs of rheumatoid arthritis in the patient. Now, in such a patient, do I test only for ANCA? And do I need to also test for RA factor and ANE? I think these are the points that the ophthalmologist sitting here would want to know. Dr. Joyce, maybe, or Dr.
Yeah,
Raj?
sure.
Yeah.
So coming back to rheumatoid factor, the diagnostic utility of rheumatoid factor in a person without joint pains is practically useless. It is not a diagnostic test. Even in rheumatoid arthritis, it is a prognostic test. The reason why we do it, see, for example, if I have a patient with typical rheumatoid arthritis, I might still want to do rheumatoid factor, only to say because those of rheumatoid arthritis patients who are rheumatoid factor positive are going to more likely damage the joints in the future than those who are negative. So I would call it more a prognostic test rather than a diagnostic test. So in the absence of joint symptoms, doing a rheumatoid factor is pretty useless. So I would omit it. Likewise, anti-CCP antibody. Anti-CCP antibody is also a more specific test for rheumatoid arthritis. So in the absence of joint symptoms, I would not do it because I don't think scleritis precedes the onset of arthritis in rheumatoid arthritis. The majority of scleritis we see in rheumatoid arthritis are in patients who have had long-standing, poorly controlled rheumatoid rather than those who have no joint symptoms. Finally, coming to the ANA is a very dicey test. You have to remember, what are you going to look for when you do an ANA? The commonest disease we diagnose with an ANA is lupus. So if you look for lupus, how many patients have lupus present with scleritis? Very few. The eye manifestations of lupus are completely different and not many will present with scleritis. So I don't think ANA is of diagnostic value. And the problem with ANA is you have false positivity or false positivities in other connective tissue diseases. You also have about 10% of normal people, those with hypothyroidism, who can be positive with ANA. So there is going to be a lot of heightened anxiety when it comes to doing an ANA. If you look at the profile, that is the other thing that everybody tends to do, the whole of ANA profile, thinking, more is better. The utility of a profile in making a diagnosis in a scleritis patient is pretty poor. Only it might help us in a patient who's strongly Rho positive, maybe a Sjogren with very severe dry eyes, who might have other inflammatory things in the eye. But once again, scleritis is not such a common presentation even there. But otherwise, other diseases that we diagnose using ANA profile, like scleroderma or myositis, they all don't commonly present with scleritis as a manifestation. It's not very common. So in that way, that's why when Dr. Lisa was, she said, if you give me a choice, I'll do only one test, and that's ANCA. But you have to remember, in any immunological disease, there can be a temporal sequence of events. So when a patient comes to you with scleritis, it doesn't mean he's not going to have nephritis 6 months down the line. So when you see, it could just be isolated scleritis. But if you think that this isolated scleritis is due to a connective tissue disease, your ANCA is negative, but you strongly feel this is immunological, the least thing that can be monitored is a blood count, a urine, and a creatinine periodically. Because all other systems, you're going to get one symptom or the other when it affects the other symptom, and it's only the kidney that's.
So that's fantastic. I think this is a very important point that I hope is clear to all of us listening today. Just a question, I'm not too happy asking this question, but in the group of patients whom Dr. Lisa mentioned, around 30 to 40% of scleritis could be ANCA negative at presentation, although it's due to primary vasculitis. is there any other blood test that needs to be done in that group where it, to pick up a primary vasculitis?
So I would rephrase that comment. Basically, the rheumatologists look at GPA or Wegener's as limited disease or systemic disease, which means that you could have granulomatous polyangiitis, which is limited only to the ears or to the upper respiratory tract or to the eye. So when you have such limited disease, it is not only scleritis, then the ANCA negativity is higher. So it's not 30% of patients with scleritis can present, of GPA can present with ANCA negativity. So, but there is no other test which will give you a diagnosis. It will be only a biopsy, which will show you necrotizing vasculitis. And then you will have to call that patient a necrotizing systemic vasculitis with scleritis, which is ANCA negative. That's it. And treat accordingly. The treatment will remain the same.
Right. So do we move on to the treatment part now, Somshila?
Yes, so before that, Soumya, we could just take up some of the audience questions, and while we are just screening through them, Partho, you had a question. So you can go ahead and ask the question, Partho.
Yeah. Good evening, the rheumatologist panel. But I'm sorry for asking a little long question. My question is why systemic association is less commonly encountered in India? Like, for example, the necrotizing scleritis, if you see the Western literature, this necrotizing scleritis has a very high systemic association, often up to 95%. But from India, we found only 60% of the patient who had some systemic disease. So is it due to relatively delayed age of systemic manifestation in Indian patients?
I think I really don't know much about this. I think Dr. Ramesh and Dr. Lisa.
Because from your, I think one of our study which came from our rheumatology colleague, that also showed that HLA-B27, the ocular manifestation was relatively at later age. So it means, can you comment on that?
HLA-B27 for uveitis?
Yeah.
So
ocular.
So the question is not clear. Are you talking about uveitis or
scleritis? I'm mainly talking about scleritis. My question is why systemic association is less common in Indian patients when we compare with Western world. For example, we have an entity called necrotizing scleritis. So the Western literature says it's very common. Systemic association is often up to 95% cases. But in India, it comes around 60 to 65%. So
that's a very important point. Yeah, I agree with that. That even in we have
so many a time we see a necrotizing patient, we refer to our rheumatology colleague. They do all tests and they just refer back to us. No evidence of any systemic rheumatic disease. You treat. So then we start treating with immunity. But why it is this systemic association, a definite cause of systemic rheumatic disease, is absent in most of these patients?
Actually, I would like to apologize that I have not read this sort of literature that there is a very great difference between the amount of systemic.
We remember when we tried to publish our necrotizing scleritis paper, which had 60% systemic association. The reviewer comment was that it's because of the either because of the less age of your patients, or it can be the lack of your rheumatology and ophthalmology coordination.
Yeah, I think the latter is more likely.
But in our tertiary institute, like in LB Prasad, Arvind, and Shankar Netrala, we usually refer all of our cases to rheumatology. It's not that we are not referring these patients to rheumatology.
I think, Partho, it probably means, Dr. Lisa, that we just have to publish more and we have to sort of try and show this with our cases, which are well investigated. That we have seen the same thing. Soumya will know that we just put together one paper where we saw very low association, even with necrotizing for systemic disease.
So sometimes, I believe sometimes when we go that in absence of this symptom, we should not do this test. I think we have to be liberal a little bit. We have to extensively investigate these patients when referred from an ophthalmologist. No? I think that may be another point. I just want to.
If we have to generate authentic data, we will have to work up as per protocol.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to look for such disease.
And
So we'll quickly run through. Dr. Rajkiran, you had some point to add to that?
Dr. Partho, one thing, like whenever like Somshila or anybody refers to me, mentioning it as a necrotizing scleritis, we tend to look more into systemic complaints, because among all the necrotizing variety of scleritis is said to be associated with more of an underlying systemic disease compared to diffuse anterior scleritis and non-necrotizing variety. So when specifically ophthalmologists mention as necrotizing scleritis, especially myself, I tend to look more extensively and investigate and evaluate this particular patient. And one thing, as Dr. Ramesh said, we have some problems in our country. Like we also need to understand that these diseases are a disease of continuum. If it starts with scleritis, it doesn't end it. So this particular patient might develop another manifestation after a few years, after a few months, maybe a renal manifestation, or it might be overlooked. And problem with our country is that the data what we have, like we have a lot of lost follow-ups. Like one particular patient which has been presented by Arvind from Vijayawada, the patient had been diagnosed as tuberculosis and we really don't know what happened. So there are a lot of lost follow-ups, and as Dr. Lisa also said, I think we need to have a more and more robust data collection to say that our population has a lesser association with of systemic disease with necrotizing scleritis compared to the
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Partha. So what I'm going to do is that since time is limited, we will go on till 8 o'clock in order to have a full half hour with the rheumatologist, and I apologize for torturing them and staying in so late. There are some simpler questions which many of the specialists here in the panel can answer. So I'll request you to, like Mamta has already answered some, so I'll request you to answer those questions. And I'm going to take the more complex ones for the rheumatologist. Amongst them, I think some of the interesting ones and complex ones are, so Shubkar has asked that is serial CRP levels useful for monitoring treatment response? I'm taking this up, and any of you can from the panel can answer.
No.
So the answer is no. It's a no.
For scleritis,
Yes, please go ahead.
for scleritis, Dr. Somshila?
Yes.
No, I don't think so. We actually go by your inputs. Like if you say there is a disease activity, then we try to look at other systems and then we decide the therapy. I think CRP correlates more with other systemic symptoms like arthritis.
Right. So another interesting question Chandresh has asked, and maybe rheumatologists too could pick this up. Any recent advances in scleritis management? Dr. Ramesh, you talked about rituximab.
Yeah. So obviously, there are lots of things coming in the pipeline, but as it stands today, the approved treatment for induction treatment is cyclophosphamide and rituximab for those with severe systemic disease, whereas the maintenance is with either rituximab, methotrexate, azathioprine, or in some cases where people don't tolerate mycophenolate. So these are the approved drugs as we stand today, but there are a lot of things that are coming up in trial. A lot of other biologics are being looked at, like abatacept and other things. Then small molecule, tocilizumab is another drug that is being looked at, which is already being used in large vessel vasculitis like Takayasu, whereas we don't use it in small vessel, but there is a sort of trial coming up. Then complement inhibitors are being looked at, different ways of using steroids, because more than the drugs we give, it's the steroid that kills the patient.
Right.
So there are various ways of looking at how can we maximize therapy with the existing drugs and how can we minimize steroids. So there are a lot of trials that are also looking at maximizing the existing drugs. Like for example, rituximab we give every 6 months. What happens if I give every 4 months? Am I going to do anything different? But can I reduce the dose of steroid if I'm going to be doing that? So such many questions are coming up. And complement inhibitor avocapan is being seen as in phase 2 trials has been successful to replace the steroid. So there are a lot of exciting things that are coming up, but as the treatment stands today, we are with the approved drugs, as I said.
Thank you. The next question is to Dr. Lisa. And the question is that, do the blood tests, that means you've investigated the patient, something came positive, maybe ANCA, do the blood tests turn negative after treatment with immunosuppression?
So ANCA titers may fall with treatment, but over-reliance on titers is not something we encourage within ourselves and also to anybody else. But there is evidence to say that if your titers are rising and you're clinically stable, then you have to be monitored more closely for a flare of disease. And persistently elevated titers of ANCA will always keep both teams on their toes. But we will not use, we will not target. No, with treatment it will come down.
Yeah.
But we will not target to lower the ANCA levels.
Can I ask a question, Sanshika?
So the flip side of the same question is that can ANCA become positive in the course of the disease? So initially
yes,
negative.
If the disease is very limited to begin with and becomes systemic, then ANCA negative can become positive.
So that we should. Please go ahead, whoever was talking.
Yeah, it was Malika. Me. Can I ask a
question? Please. Yes, Malika.
Many times we feel that we need to start oral steroids because the disease is macular threatening or optic nerve threatening. But then we also wonder whether it will affect the results of the investigations that we have also ordered at the same time, like the skin Mantoux test or the TB Gold and various others, ANA even, ANCA even. So just wanted to know whether I generally ask the patients to wait for 48 hours before starting the steroids because Mantoux might get affected. So just wanted to know from the rheumatologist whether really those things get affected and we should really wait for the...
No, if you have organ-threatening disease, we should not wait. These tests don't get affected so sensitively by the use of steroids for short periods of time. So absolutely no need to wait to start steroids before you do these tests.
Even the Mantoux test doesn't get affected with the high
Not
dose.
at all. Not at all.
Dr. Lisa and Dr. Rajkiran, any experience with tofacitinib?
Yeah, tofacitinib, because I personally have not used tofacitinib in any of the patients of scleritis, but definitely I have gone through some literature where tofacitinib has been tried in patients who had failed multiple therapies. So, tofacitinib is effective in scleritis and as well as uveitis. And there is also another drug called filgotinib. This is also a JAK inhibitor, which is JAK1 inhibition it does. And it has shown that the topical variety of it has shown that it is effective in mouse models. So probably maybe topical JAK inhibitors might be expected in future, which might be helpful in these cases.
One very interesting question is that is an ophthalmologist entitled to start or manage with immunosuppressants legally? So we often refer patients to you to also manage, but more in terms of we're looking at you to look at the systemic side effects and so it takes us out of that equation. But the question here is, if we don't have a rheumatologist, are we legally allowed to start medication?
That's something you will have to answer.
I think because till methotrexate, these things I think many of them are using. But if you're coming up to drugs like biologics, I think biologics, I don't think so in India ophthalmologists are allowed to use or they're allowed to prescribe, because biologics, certain set of doctors like rheumatologists, gastroenterologists, they have been permitted. I'm not very sure whether it has been approved for ophthalmologists to prescribe biologics. Remaining drugs, though, I think because based upon your experience, because some doctors, ophthalmologists have better experience in treating scleritis than some of the rheumatologists and using these drugs in these particular cases. But for biologics, I think I'm not very sure whether ophthalmologists have been permitted in India to because since you're talking about the legal issue, patients can have a risk of developing complications when you give biologics, especially anti-TNF. A patient might develop tuberculosis. With rituximab, patient might develop some complications. So I think it might be risky if you're not involving a rheumatologist or at least maybe a physician who has an experience of using these drugs.
Yes. So the point here is that medico-legally, we are permitted to prescribe, even including biologicals. But are we the best people to prescribe? Or rather we can prescribe, but are we the best people to monitor? So probably we should co-manage in case we're doing something like that. I'm going to hand over to Soumya for a while. Dr. Ramesh, interestingly, in the middle of one of the cases, you had talked about cavitatory lesions and how you should not assume that it's tuberculosis. And so how should we differentiate? For example, both those patients had GPA and one had cavitatory lesions, so tuberculosis treatment was started. So could you just throw some more light on that? There are a lot of questions on QTB and other such testing, which is gold standard. So just a little bit of clarity on all of this. And Soumya is needed for this part.
Yeah.
Answering. Before he starts answering, there's an interesting question going on, and some of us have replied to that. It is which test to be ordered, C-ANCA or P-ANCA, or both? I think it will be great if one of the rheumatologists could answer this question.
Okay. So I would advise you to just order for ANCA. Don't worry whether it's C or P, because one, the association of ANCA positive, C-ANCA is highest for Wegener's. If you look at EGPA, what Dr. Lisa was saying, that Scherfstrass, in other simple language, the association of ANCA falls. And some EGPAs are C-ANCA positive and some are P-ANCA positive. Then you have the third variety of vasculitis, which is microscopic polyangiitis. And we do also have cases of microscopic polyangiitis who have rarely presented with inflammatory eye disease, where P-ANCA positivity is more. But then there are many cases of Wegener's who may be positive for P-ANCA at a smaller titer. So don't worry too much about P or C, just order for ANCA. The most important thing when you order for ANCA is to see what method does your lab do it, because there are two methods of doing it. One is the immunofluorescence. Based on the immunofluorescence pattern, they then do the ELISA for the particular antigen, whether it's the PR3 or the NPO. So ensure that both are done by your lab. That completes the ANCA test and it gives you sort of a rough idea. That's sort of about the ANCA business.
So just to stop you there. So should we advise for both immunofluorescence and ELISA at the first visit itself, or if immunofluorescence is positive, we should advise for the specific antigen with ELISA?
Generally, when you say ANCA, the lab is supposed to do immunofluorescence first. That is the way it is supposed to be done. If it's positive, they want to do the ELISA, the quantitative ELISA. But there are many labs which do not do immunofluorescence at all. They give you only a quantitative estimation on the ELISA. So just be aware of that there is a lot of discrepancy in lab reports.
So actually current international recommendations would be to do both. But as I agree with Dr. Ramesh that maybe asking one after the other would be a practical choice. But considering, as Dr. Ramesh mentioned, the discrepancies in the quality of labs and also within the test itself, ANA is a more robust test when done by IF and when done by ELISA. But ANCA has its limitations based on the expertise of the person who is seeing the slide. And also it's slightly more difficult to interpret an ANCA slide than an ANA slide. So if you have to be played very safe, and if you have to play it by international recommendations, then maybe you should be doing both.
So just to clarify once more, sorry. So do we, so if only quantitative ELISA is positive, or if only quantitative ELISA is done, do we send the patient back for immunofluorescence assay?
If your quantitative estimation shows a very strongly positive PR3, then I wouldn't worry actually, because if there are other clinical features to suggest ANCA vasculitis, then I would go ahead and treat. If scleritis is the only manifestation, then it's a different issue. But for us rheumatologists, there are something called vasculitis mimics, where there are a lot of systemic diseases that mimic vasculitis, a lot of infections mimic vasculitis. So for us, the gold standard is not ANCA, but for us, the gold standard is a biopsy of the involved organ. So this brings us back to Dr. Somasheila's question about cavities. When we talked about cavities, how do you differentiate infectious versus non-infectious? We use all sorts of things. One is obviously, some radiologists might talk about thick walled, thin walled, TB versus non-TB, but that's not the gold standard. We obviously have to ask for sputum test, undoubtedly. If the patient is not producing sputum, induced sputum test is also equally important. If the patient is still not being able to produce anything, even on inducing sputum, then a bronchoscopy is worthwhile if the facilities are available. If the cavity is peripherally placed, then a CT guided biopsy is also another option. So where possible, taking a tissue is very important. Sometimes, let's say for example, you had a deep cavity that is not accessible through a CT guided biopsy. You have a patient where you don't have bronchoscopy facility, then your only other clue would be the presence of disease elsewhere. So if I see a pleuritis patient with a cavity that is not accessible to me but has proteinuria, then my diagnosis wavers towards Wegener's or vasculitis. So you'll have to use your clinical acumen to see. Honestly, there is nothing gold standard everywhere. We have to tailor it to each patient. The economics come to play. The facilities available at that particular city comes to play. But where possible, the bottom line is try to get a tissue diagnosis. That's crucial because you're labeling somebody with a disease that's going to be lifelong. You're going to be counseling them about a disease that has got exacerbations and remissions. You're going to be telling them about a disease that has high-end immunosuppression.
So unfortunately, it is 8 p.m. and we were planning to end at 8 p.m. I cannot tell you how pleased I am to see the amount of interest that having you on the session has generated, and you've educated all of us, I'm sure, including the panelists that are there, and of course all the delegates who have logged in. Any last comments, Dr. JB, if Dr. Ratnam is there, and our senior faculty, Dr. JB especially, thank you so much for staying from beginning till the end.
Thank you, Shamshila, because it's a very interesting session and very useful session. Particularly, I like that rheumatologist input and that interaction. We didn't have that much of opportunity to have 1 hour with the rheumatologist in other forum, and this was a really learning experience for all of us.
Dr. Lisa, would you like to just give us some last bits of advice?
It's a very well organized meeting.
Dr. Rajkiran wanted to say something.
Yes, Dr. Rajkiran, please.
I think there is, apart from IF and ELISA, there is one more method called line immunoassay, which some of the labs do. So I think, as Dr. Ramesh said, in our country, we have multiple different methods which are obsolete in other countries, people still are doing. So this, you might come across the report which is done by a method called line immunoassay. That also doesn't have much of authenticity as on today. And I would say, like, if you have only patient has a very, very limited money, and if you are suspecting Wegener's or GPA, and doing anti-PR3 ELISA would be, you can bet your money on anti-PR3 ELISA, rather than, in an ideal situation, we have to go by IF, ELISA and all these things. But I think if in a resource limited settings, I think anti-PR3 ELISA is one test better if you can do.
So with that, we conclude the meeting. It's my very pleasant duty to thank